My beloved child, there is a door in front of you that you may not recognize yet. You have been looking for something obvious, something dramatic, something that would leave no doubt in your mind that your season has changed. But what if the door you have been praying about does not look like a miracle when it first appears? What if it looks like a small decision, an unexpected conversation, a new responsibility, or an opportunity you almost dismiss because it does not resemble the answer you imagined? You have asked God for a new chapter, but perhaps you have been expecting the chapter to announce itself before you turn the page. And that is where I want you to slow down. Because sometimes the most important moments in your life do not arrive with noise. They arrive quietly. They arrive while you are still wondering if anything is happening at all. There may be a reason you found yourself thinking about your future again. There may be a reason an old desire has started returning to your heart. There may be a reason you suddenly feel ready to do something you were afraid to do months ago. I am not telling you that every unusual moment is a supernatural sign. But I am asking you to consider something deeper. What if the season you thought was only about waiting has also been preparing you to recognize an opportunity when it appears? Stay with this thought, because the meaning of an open door is much deeper than simply getting what you wanted. Picture a quiet morning in a small apartment before the rest of the city fully wakes. Pale sunlight is beginning to touch the curtains. A cup of coffee sits untouched on a kitchen counter. On the table is a notebook filled with plans that were written months ago and then forgotten. The person sitting there has changed since those plans were written. At one time, they believed their future had to happen according to one specific timeline. They had pictured where they would be, what they would have, and how everything would finally come together. Then life interrupted the plan. An opportunity disappeared. A relationship changed. A decision had to be reconsidered. Something they thought was certain became uncertain. For a while, they interpreted that uncertainty as failure. They wondered if they had somehow missed God's direction. They wondered whether they had prayed incorrectly. They wondered whether the dream had simply been too much to ask for. But one morning, something subtle happened. They opened the same notebook and noticed a sentence they had written long before: "I want a life that honors God, not simply a life that looks successful." They stared at those words for a long time, because suddenly they realized they had spent months asking God to open a particular door without asking whether that door was actually leading them toward the person they were becoming. That realization changed the way they prayed. Instead of saying, "God, please make this happen exactly the way I want," they began saying, "God, if there is a door you want me to walk through, give me wisdom to recognize it. And if there is a door I should leave behind, give me peace to release it." That prayer did not instantly change their circumstances. But it changed the way they looked at them. And sometimes that is where the next chapter begins. Perhaps you are standing in a similar place. You have asked God for something meaningful. You have prayed about a career decision, a purpose, a relationship, a financial burden, a family situation, a personal dream, or simply the courage to begin again. You may have reached a point where you no longer want to force anything. You still hope, but your hope has become quieter. You are no longer demanding a specific timeline. You just want to know that your life is moving in the right direction. And maybe that is exactly the kind of heart that can recognize an open door without becoming controlled by it. Because an open door is not always the easiest door. Sometimes the door that leads into growth requires courage. Sometimes it asks you to leave behind a familiar routine. Sometimes it requires you to become a beginner again. Sometimes it gives you an opportunity to serve when you wanted recognition. Sometimes it gives you responsibility when you were asking for comfort. Sometimes it gives you a chance to use a gift you buried because you were afraid people would judge you. And sometimes the door is not connected to something new at all. Sometimes it is the opportunity to return to something good that fear, disappointment, or distraction caused you to abandon. That is why discernment matters. Not every open door is your door. Some opportunities look attractive because they feed your ego. Others look ordinary because they require humility. Some paths promise immediate comfort but quietly pull you away from your values. Others require patience but bring you closer to the kind of person you want to become. Scripture says in Proverbs 3 to trust in the Lord and not lean entirely on your own understanding. That does not mean you stop using wisdom. It means you recognize that your first impression is not always the whole picture. Think about a door in an old house. From the outside, it may look plain. The paint may be worn. The handle may be simple. There may be nothing impressive about it. But what matters is what lies beyond it. In the same way, an opportunity does not need to look spectacular to be meaningful. Maybe the next important step in your life will appear ordinary. Maybe someone will ask you a simple question. Maybe you will hear an idea that stays with you. Maybe you will notice a need that you have the ability to meet. Maybe you will be invited into something that requires your gifts. Maybe you will discover that the skill you thought was insignificant is exactly the skill that can serve someone else. Do not become so focused on dramatic signs that you miss ordinary opportunities to be faithful. Jesus often drew attention to things that appeared small but carried great meaning. A seed. A lamp. A lost coin. A loaf of bread. A cup of water. A mustard seed. The kingdom of God was repeatedly illustrated through ordinary things that people could easily overlook. Perhaps there is something ordinary in your life right now that deserves another look. And here is where the title begins to take on a different meaning. The door to your promised blessing just opened. That does not mean you should assume every opportunity is a guaranteed blessing from God. It means that you should become attentive to what God may be placing in front of you and wise enough to evaluate it. A blessing is not simply something that makes your life easier. Sometimes a blessing strengthens your character. Sometimes it stretches your faith. Sometimes it gives you the opportunity to become useful to someone else. Sometimes it teaches you that success without peace is not the success you actually wanted. And sometimes what feels like a blessing is simply an invitation to take one faithful step. The moment may not be the final destination. It may be the beginning of a road you cannot yet see. Maybe that is why you have felt restless lately. Not because something terrible is about to happen, but because you are beginning to outgrow an old version of your life. The routine that once felt comfortable may now feel too small. The excuses that once protected you may now feel exhausting. The fear that once kept you safe may now be keeping you still. You may have reached a point where you cannot keep telling yourself that someday you will begin. Someday is not a destination. There comes a moment when preparation has to become action. And perhaps the open door is not asking you to have everything figured out. Perhaps it is simply asking you to step closer and look. There is a difference between being unprepared and being afraid. You may tell yourself you need more time when what you really need is courage. You may tell yourself you need another sign when what you really need is wisdom. You may tell yourself you are waiting on God when you are actually waiting for uncertainty to disappear. But uncertainty may never completely disappear. Faith does not mean you know every detail before you move. Sometimes faith means you have enough clarity for the next step. Isaiah 41 reminds us not to fear because God is with His people and strengthens them. The comfort in that passage is not that every road becomes predictable. The comfort is that you do not walk the road alone. So tonight, ask yourself a question you may not have asked before. What if the next door does not require me to become someone else? What if it requires me to finally become the person God has been shaping me to be? What if the discipline you developed during the waiting season was preparation? What if the disappointment taught you discernment? What if the quiet season gave you depth? What if the delay taught you patience that you will need in the next chapter? What if the things you thought were interruptions were actually lessons that will help you walk differently when the opportunity arrives? You may have been looking backward at what did not happen. But perhaps it is time to look forward at what could happen if you stop letting yesterday decide what you are capable of doing tomorrow. You do not need to erase your past. You do not need to pretend every disappointment was easy. You simply need to stop allowing old disappointment to become a permanent prophecy over your future. And there is one more thing you need to understand before you step toward any new door. Sometimes God opens a door, and the first thing you feel is not excitement. Sometimes you feel afraid. That does not automatically mean the door is wrong. Sometimes fear simply means the next chapter requires a version of courage you have never needed before. And that is where the deeper part of this story begins. Fear has a strange way of disguising itself as wisdom. It can sound reasonable. It can tell you to wait until you are more prepared, more confident, more certain, more financially secure, more experienced, or more accepted. Sometimes those things genuinely matter. But sometimes fear keeps moving the finish line. Every time you become ready, it invents another reason you should wait. And eventually, you can spend years standing in front of a door because you are waiting to feel completely fearless before you touch the handle. But courage was never the absence of fear. Courage is deciding that fear does not get the final vote. Maybe this is why the next season requires something from you that the previous season did not. You have already learned how to wait. You have learned how to survive uncertainty. You have learned how to keep praying when you could not see results. Now perhaps you are being invited to learn how to move when the path becomes visible. That transition can feel uncomfortable because waiting and moving require two different kinds of faith. Waiting asks you to trust God with what you cannot control. Moving asks you to trust God while taking responsibility for what you can control. And maybe the door in front of you is not asking for a giant leap. Maybe it is asking for one honest step. There was once a man who had spent years becoming known for something he never intended to do. His work was stable. His routine was predictable. People around him considered him successful. From the outside, there was no obvious reason for him to change anything. But privately, he felt that something important was missing. He had an ability he rarely used because he was afraid of starting over. He had an idea he kept postponing because he thought the timing was never right. He prayed about it repeatedly, asking God for a clear sign. Months passed. Then one ordinary afternoon, a friend called him and asked for help with a small project. Nothing about the request seemed extraordinary. It was not a huge opportunity. There was no dramatic announcement. But the man agreed. That small project introduced him to someone else. That conversation led to another opportunity. That opportunity required him to develop a skill he had neglected for years. Slowly, almost invisibly, the direction of his life began changing. Looking backward, he could see a chain of small decisions that had connected in ways he could never have planned. But while he was living through them, none of them looked important. That is how many new chapters begin. Not with one enormous moment, but with a series of ordinary acts of faithfulness that become meaningful when viewed together. Perhaps you have been waiting for a door so obvious that you could never question it. But maybe God is inviting you to develop discernment instead of demanding certainty. There is a difference. Certainty says, I will move when I know exactly how everything will turn out. Discernment says, I may not know the entire outcome, but I can prayerfully evaluate this next step. That is a much more mature way to walk. You can ask good questions. Does this opportunity align with your values? Does it require you to compromise your integrity? Does it pull you closer to God or make you constantly ignore what matters most? Does it require wise preparation? Have you sought counsel from people who genuinely care about your character rather than simply telling you what you want to hear? Are you acting from peace and wisdom, or are you acting because you are terrified that this is your only chance? These questions do not weaken faith. They protect it. Faith and wisdom were never enemies. Proverbs 3 verses 5 to 6 tells us to trust God rather than relying entirely on our own understanding, and to acknowledge Him in our ways. Notice that the instruction is about a way of living, not merely one dramatic decision. It is a daily posture. You walk. You acknowledge. You trust. You learn. You adjust. You continue. That means you do not have to know the entire map before taking the next step. You simply need enough light for where your feet are going. Think about walking through a dark room with a small lamp. The lamp does not illuminate the entire house. It gives you enough visibility to move safely. Sometimes that is what faith feels like. You ask God to show you the entire future, and instead you receive enough clarity for today. You may not like how little you can see, but it may be exactly enough. And there is another reason an open door can feel frightening. When something you have prayed for finally becomes possible, suddenly you have something to lose. While you were waiting, you could imagine the future without having to risk anything. But when the opportunity becomes real, you have to make a decision. You have to leave the safety of imagination and enter reality. That is where many people stop. They wanted the dream, but they were not prepared for the vulnerability required to pursue it. They wanted the new chapter, but they were afraid to close the old one. They wanted the opportunity, but they were afraid someone might criticize them if they failed. They wanted change, but they did not want the discomfort that comes with growth. If that is where you are, hear this carefully: you do not need to guarantee success before you begin. You need to be willing to be faithful. Jesus never called his followers to a life where every step came with complete explanation. Again and again, he called people to follow. Follow before they knew every detail. Follow before they had all the answers. Follow while they were still learning. There is something deeply freeing about that. You are not required to understand the entire journey before you begin walking with God. You are invited to trust Him one step at a time. Maybe your open door will look like an invitation you almost decline. Maybe it will require you to speak when you usually remain silent. Maybe it will require you to learn something new. Maybe it will require you to stop waiting for someone else to validate the gift God has placed within you. Maybe it will require you to forgive someone and move forward without receiving the apology you hoped for. Maybe it will require you to release a version of success that no longer fits your values. Maybe the blessing is not simply something you receive. Maybe it is the freedom to become who you were created to be without constantly asking whether everyone else approves. That is why I want you to be careful with the word blessing. We often use it to describe something pleasant. More money. A better opportunity. A beautiful relationship. A new home. A promotion. A dream becoming reality. Those things can certainly be blessings. But Scripture gives us a much deeper picture. A blessing can also involve character, wisdom, peace, purpose, relationships, and the ability to serve others well. Sometimes the greatest blessing is not getting more. It is becoming more grounded, more generous, more patient, more courageous, more free from the need to prove yourself, more secure in your identity in Christ. And maybe that is why your previous season felt so different from what you expected. You were praying for circumstances to change, while God may have been building something in you that circumstances alone could never create. You wanted a door. He was building the person who would walk through it. You wanted an opportunity. He was developing the character required to handle it. You wanted movement. He was developing patience so that movement would not make you reckless. Consider the moment when a person finally receives the opportunity they have been waiting for. The email arrives. The phone rings. The invitation is real. For a few seconds, everything they have imagined seems possible. But then the excitement settles, and another thought appears: what if I am not ready? That question can become either a prison or an invitation. If you let it control you, you may retreat. But if you bring it to God, it can become a prayer: Lord, if this is something I should pursue, give me what I need to handle it well. That is a very different prayer from, God, make me fearless. You are not asking to become someone who never feels uncertain. You are asking for wisdom in the middle of uncertainty. Philippians 4 teaches believers to bring their concerns to God through prayer and thanksgiving, and it points toward a peace that goes beyond ordinary understanding. That peace does not necessarily mean the situation becomes simple. It means your heart does not have to be controlled by the situation. You can be excited without becoming obsessed. You can be cautious without becoming paralyzed. You can be hopeful without pretending to know the future. You can move forward without demanding guarantees. So if a door has recently appeared in your life, do not rush simply because you have been waiting. But do not automatically reject it because it scares you either. Pause. Pray. Think. Seek wisdom. Examine your motives. And then ask a different question. Not, is this exactly what I dreamed about? Ask, what kind of person will this path require me to become? That question can reveal more than you expect. Because sometimes the door to the next season is not attractive because it is easy. It is meaningful because it requires growth. And there is something else you may not have considered. The door you are looking at may not only change your circumstances. It may change who you are able to help. A skill you develop could eventually become someone else's answer to a need. A lesson you learn through disappointment could become wisdom you share with someone walking through the same season. A difficult chapter you survived could give you compassion for someone who feels completely alone. The very experience you once wished God would remove may eventually become part of the reason you can understand and encourage another person. That means your blessing does not have to end with you. Perhaps the door is not simply opening you into something you have wanted. Perhaps it is opening you into a place where something God has placed inside you can finally become useful. And that changes the question again. Maybe the real question is not, when will I finally receive what I have been praying for? Maybe it is, what has God been preparing me to give? Because the next chapter may hold more purpose than you realize. And before you step through that door, there is one thing you need to release, the belief that you have to carry the entire future on your shoulders. You were never meant to carry the entire future on your shoulders. You were never asked to know how every detail would unfold before taking the next step. And perhaps that is why this season has felt heavier than it needed to. You have been trying to solve tomorrow with the strength you have today. You have been rehearsing conversations that have not happened, worrying about outcomes that do not exist yet, and imagining every possible way something could go wrong. But Jesus offers a different way of living. He invites you to receive today as today. To trust God with tomorrow while being faithful with what is in front of you now. Matthew 11 reminds us of the invitation of Jesus to come to Him when we are weary and burdened. Notice that He does not begin by demanding that the burdened person figure everything out. He begins with an invitation to come. Maybe that is what your heart needs before you walk through any new door. Not another strategy. Not another prediction. Not another attempt to control the outcome. Simply the reminder that you do not have to carry what only God can carry. Think about a traveler standing inside a train station with one suitcase beside them. The departure board keeps changing. One train is delayed. Another has been moved to a different platform. People around them are rushing in different directions, convinced they know exactly where they need to go. For a moment, the traveler feels the pressure to move quickly too. But then they stop. They check the information carefully. They realize their train has not disappeared. The platform has simply changed. What looked like a delay was actually a change in direction. And that small distinction matters. Sometimes we assume that because something did not happen according to our plan, God must have closed the entire journey. But perhaps only the route changed. Maybe the destination you thought was connected to one specific path is not limited to that path. Maybe you have been grieving a route when you should have been asking God to show you another way forward. That does not mean every disappointment is secretly a blessing. Sometimes disappointment is simply painful. Sometimes loss is genuinely painful. Sometimes we need to grieve what we hoped would happen. Faith does not require you to call every painful experience good. But faith can help you believe that pain does not have to become meaningless. Romans 8 verse 28 speaks about God working through all things for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purpose. The verse does not say every individual event is good. It points toward a God who can work through circumstances that we would never have chosen. That distinction matters. You do not have to pretend that everything that happened was what you wanted. You can acknowledge the disappointment and still believe that your story is not finished. Maybe you are carrying a closed door from your past. Something you prayed would happen did not happen. Someone you expected to stay did not stay, disappeared. A plan that seemed certain suddenly changed. And because that door closed, you became afraid of hoping again. You told yourself, I will never get excited about something like that again. You thought you were protecting your heart. But sometimes protection can quietly become imprisonment. If you refuse to hope because you are afraid of disappointment, you also refuse to make room for possibility. You do not need to become careless with your heart. But you can become wise without becoming closed. You can remember what happened without allowing it to decide what must happen next. There is a difference between remembering a lesson and living inside an old chapter. The lesson can come with you. The chapter does not have to. Take what you learned. Keep the wisdom. Keep the discernment. Keep the maturity. But you do not have to keep the fear. Perhaps that is one reason this new door feels unfamiliar. It is not only asking you to move towards something. It is asking you to stop allowing something behind you to determine how you respond to what is ahead. Imagine standing at the entrance of a room you have never entered. Behind you is everything you know. Ahead is uncertainty. Your hand rests on the handle, but your mind begins listing everything that could happen if you walk through. What if you fail? What if people criticize you? What if it does not work? What if you regret it? What if you lose something comfortable? What if you discover you are not as capable as you thought? Those questions can become overwhelming. But there is another question you could ask. What if I never discover what is on the other side because I was too afraid to take one faithful step? That question is not a command to chase every opportunity. It is an invitation to examine what fear has been costing you. Fear can protect you from some mistakes, but it can also keep you from some growth. Wisdom helps you tell the difference. And perhaps the next door in your life will require you to release the need for everyone to understand your decision. That can be difficult, especially when you are used to seeking approval. You may have spent years explaining yourself. Explaining why you chose one path. Explaining why you changed direction. Explaining why you said no. Explaining why you are pursuing something different. But not everyone will understand what God is teaching you in a particular season. Some people only recognize your old version because that is the version they are familiar with. When you begin changing, their expectations may not change at the same speed. That does not mean you should become arrogant or ignore wise counsel. It means you should learn the difference between counsel and pressure. A wise voice may challenge you while still respecting your character. Pressure may demand that you become someone you are not simply to make someone else comfortable. Ask God for discernment. Not everyone who questions your direction is against you, and not everyone who supports your decision has wisdom. Listen carefully. Pray carefully. Choose carefully. There may be a point where you realize that the door God is opening requires you to become more responsible with something you already possess. Maybe it is your time. Maybe it is your attention. Maybe it is your money. Maybe it is your words. Maybe it is your health and daily habits. Maybe it is a gift you have neglected. You might be asking for a larger platform while God is watching what you do with the small audience already listening. You might be asking for greater influence while God is teaching you how to treat the one person in front of you. You might be asking for more resources while God is teaching you stewardship with what you already have. Jesus repeatedly emphasized faithfulness in small things. That principle is easy to overlook because we naturally want dramatic evidence that we are progressing. But small faithfulness creates something that excitement cannot create: stability. If you learn to show up when nobody is watching, you will be better prepared when people are watching. If you learn to keep your word in small matters, you will be more prepared for larger responsibilities. If you learn to manage your emotions in ordinary moments, you will be better prepared when pressure increases. So perhaps your current assignment is smaller than the dream you are praying for. Do it anyway. Do it with excellence. Do it with integrity. Do it without needing applause. Because the size of today's assignment does not determine the value of today's obedience. There is another layer to this that I want you to see. Sometimes we imagine a promised blessing as something that will finally make us feel complete. We think, when this happens, then I will be peaceful. When I get there, then I will finally be happy. When I receive that opportunity, then I will know I am valuable. But if you attach your identity to the outcome, even a successful outcome can become a source of anxiety. You will spend your energy protecting the thing instead of enjoying it. You will constantly wonder whether it can disappear. That is why your identity must be anchored deeper than your circumstances. Your value was not created by the opportunity you are waiting for. Your worth will not increase when the door opens, and it will not decrease if one door closes. You are already someone created in the image of God. You already matter. You already have purpose. The next chapter can add responsibility, opportunity, experience, and influence, but it does not have to create your worth. Pressure may demand that you become someone you are not simply to make someone else comfortable. Ask God for discernment. Not everyone who questions your direction is against you, and not everyone who supports your decision has wisdom. Listen carefully. Pray carefully. Choose carefully. There may be a point where you realize that the door God is opening requires you to become more responsible with something you already possess. Maybe it is your time. Maybe it is your attention. Maybe it is your money. Maybe it is your words. Maybe it is your health and daily habits. Maybe it is a gift you have neglected. You might be asking for a larger platform while God is watching what you do with the small audience already listening. You might be asking for greater influence while God is teaching you how to treat the one person in front of you. You might be asking for more resources while God is teaching you stewardship with what you already have. Jesus repeatedly emphasized faithfulness in small things. That principle is easy to overlook because we naturally want dramatic evidence that we are progressing. But small faithfulness creates something that excitement cannot create, stability. If you learn to show up when nobody is watching, you will be better prepared when people are watching. If you learn to keep your word in small matters, you will be more prepared for larger responsibilities. If you learn to manage your emotions in ordinary moments, you will be better prepared when pressure increases. So perhaps your current assignment is smaller than the dream you are praying for. Do it anyway. Do it with excellence. Do it with integrity. Do it without needing applause. Because the size of today's assignment does not determine the value of today's obedience. There is another layer to this that I want you to see. Sometimes we imagine a promised blessing as something that will finally make us feel complete. We think, when this happens, then I will be peaceful. When I get there, then I will finally be happy. When I receive that opportunity, then I will know I am valuable. But if you attach your identity to the outcome, even a successful outcome can become a source of anxiety. You will spend your energy protecting the thing instead of enjoying it. You will constantly wonder whether it can disappear. That is why your identity must be anchored deeper than your circumstances. Your value was not created by the opportunity you are waiting for. Your worth will not increase when the door opens, and it will not decrease if one door closes. You are already someone created in the image of God. You already matter. You already have purpose. The next chapter can add responsibility, opportunity, experience, and influence, but it does not have to create your worth. There comes a point when you realize that the door was never only about what was waiting on the other side. It was also about who you would become while approaching it. You may have spent months asking God to change your circumstances, but perhaps the greater work was happening in the quiet places nobody could see. Your patience was being strengthened. Your motives were being examined. Your priorities were being rearranged. Your dependence on approval was being challenged. And slowly, you became someone who could walk toward an opportunity without believing that the opportunity would define your worth. That is a powerful change. Because when you no longer need something to prove who you are, you can finally receive it with open hands. You can pursue a dream without worshipping it. You can accept an opportunity without making it your identity. You can walk through a new door without forgetting the one who brought you there. Maybe this is what your moment looks like. Not fireworks. Not a voice from heaven. Not a guarantee that every detail of your life will suddenly become easy. Maybe it is simply a quiet realization that you are ready to stop running from the future because of what happened in the past. You have been through enough to know that life does not always follow your plans. But you have also learned that unexpected turns do not have to destroy your purpose. You have learned to pray before reacting. You have learned to pause before deciding. You have learned that not every closed door deserves to be reopened. You have learned that some things you once begged God to give you would not have been good for you at that particular time. And perhaps now, when something new appears, you will recognize the difference between desperation and direction. You will not have to grab it simply because you are afraid nothing else will come. You can examine it. You can pray over it. You can seek wisdom. You can move carefully. And if you sense that the path is right, you can step forward without demanding that God reveal the entire journey first. There is something beautiful about the way God often works through ordinary faithfulness. A person wakes up and does the work they almost gave up on. Someone finally makes the call they have been avoiding. Someone opens the Bible again after a season of spiritual dryness. Someone decides to forgive without pretending the past never happened. Someone starts learning a skill they once believed was beyond them. Someone finally says no to what repeatedly pulled them away from peace. Someone chooses integrity when compromise would have been easier. None of these moments may look like a promised blessing from the outside. But each one can become part of the road towards something greater. Your next chapter may begin with an act that seems almost too small to matter. Do not underestimate it. A life can change direction through one decision repeated consistently. Perhaps you have been asking, God, where is my opportunity? And maybe the better question is, God, what opportunity is already in my hands that I have been overlooking? There may be a gift you have treated as ordinary because it comes naturally to you. There may be wisdom you gained through experience that you have never considered valuable. There may be someone in your life who needs exactly the encouragement you are capable of giving. There may be an idea you keep postponing. There may be a responsibility you have been treating as an inconvenience when it is actually training you for something greater. You do not have to know whether it is the final answer. You simply have to be faithful with it. Jesus spoke often about serving faithfully rather than chasing status. He showed that greatness in God's kingdom is not measured only by visibility. Sometimes the most meaningful work happens quietly. A person who encourages someone when nobody else knows. A parent who chooses patience. A friend who stays. A believer who forgives. A worker who refuses to compromise integrity. A person who continues praying when there is no applause for their faithfulness. Heaven's definition of significance is deeper than the world's definition of success. So perhaps the door opening in your life is not primarily about becoming more visible. Perhaps it is about becoming more useful. And that changes everything. You may have prayed for a platform, but God may be preparing your character before expanding your influence. You may have prayed for more resources, but perhaps you are learning stewardship before receiving more responsibility. You may have prayed for a relationship, but perhaps you are learning how to love without controlling. You may have prayed for a new beginning, but perhaps you are learning how to stop carrying old bitterness into new places. You may have prayed for purpose, but perhaps purpose is being discovered through the ordinary things you have been faithful to do. This is why you should not rush past the season you are in. There may be something here that you will need later. Psalm 27 speaks about waiting for the Lord with courage and strength. Waiting is not portrayed as weakness. It can be an active form of trust. It can be the place where your courage develops. It can be where you learn to remain steady without constant confirmation. And when the moment to move finally comes, you may discover that the waiting gave you something the opportunity itself could never give you. It gave you roots. And roots matter when the wind changes. Because every new door brings new responsibilities. Every opportunity brings new decisions. Every answered prayer can create new challenges. If you enter the next season without roots, you may be overwhelmed by the very thing you once prayed for. But if you enter with wisdom, humility, and a heart anchored in Christ, you can receive what comes without being controlled by it. That is why your prayer tonight does not need to be complicated. You can simply say, Jesus, if you are opening a door in front of me, help me recognize it. If it is not for me, give me peace to walk away. If it is an opportunity to grow, give me courage. If it is an opportunity to serve, give me humility. If it is something I need to wait for, give me patience. And whatever comes next, keep my heart close to you. That prayer leaves room for God's wisdom. And maybe that is exactly what you need. Because the most dangerous thing is not always a closed door. Sometimes it is walking through an open door without asking where it leads. You do not need to chase every opportunity. You do not need to prove that this is your moment by saying yes to everything. Your moment may actually be the moment you learn to discern. The moment you stop confusing activity with progress. The moment you stop measuring your life by how quickly things happen. The moment you stop believing that someone else's success means you are late. The moment you stop forcing what God never asked you to force. Your moment may be quieter than you imagined. But quiet does not mean insignificant. Maybe your moment is deciding to begin again. Maybe it is finally forgiving yourself for a mistake you have carried for too long. Maybe it is choosing to trust God after disappointment. Maybe it is taking your gift seriously. Maybe it is becoming disciplined with your time. Maybe it is walking away from something that continually steals your peace. Maybe it is opening yourself to a possibility you once dismissed. Maybe it is simply waking up tomorrow with a different attitude toward your life. The door may be physical. But the greatest opening may happen inside your heart. And when that happens, you begin seeing your past differently. You stop asking only, why did this happen to me, and begin asking, what did I learn through it? You stop seeing every delay as punishment. You stop interpreting every closed door as rejection. You stop assuming that silence means abandonment. You begin to recognize that you can move forward without having every question answered. That is maturity. That is faith. That is freedom. And perhaps one day you will look back at this exact season and realize that the thing you thought was holding you back was actually teaching you how to walk differently. The waiting taught you patience. The disappointment taught you discernment. The uncertainty taught you dependence on God. The small responsibilities taught you stewardship. The quiet moments taught you to listen. And when the opportunity finally appeared, you were able to recognize it because you were no longer looking for something to rescue you. You were looking for something you could faithfully walk into. So if a door is opening in your life right now, do not be afraid to approach it. You do not have to sprint. You do not have to know everything. You do not have to convince everyone. You do not have to make the future happen overnight. Take the next wise step. Pray. Listen. Prepare. And walk with Jesus. Because perhaps this is what the title really means. The door to your promised blessing just opened. Not a promise that every desire will instantly become reality. Not a guarantee that every circumstance will change tomorrow. But an invitation to recognize that your season may be changing in ways you could not see before. An invitation to stop assuming that nothing is happening simply because you cannot see the whole picture. An invitation to step into what God may be placing before you with wisdom instead of fear. And when you finally stand on the other side of that door, do not forget the person you were while waiting outside. Remember the prayers. Remember the quiet mornings. Remember the moments when you almost gave up. Remember the lessons. Remember the people who helped you. Remember how much you had to learn. And most importantly, remember Jesus. Because the greatest blessing was never simply the door. It was learning that you could walk toward an uncertain future without walking alone. So take a breath. Look at what is in front of you. Ask God for wisdom. And then, when the next faithful step becomes clear, Take it, you may not see the entire road. You may not know where every turn will lead. But you do not need the whole map to take the next step. Sometimes the door opens quietly. Sometimes the opportunity arrives unexpectedly. Sometimes the blessing begins as something so ordinary that you almost overlook it. So keep your heart awake. Keep your faith grounded. Keep your hands open. And do not let yesterday's closed door convince you that tomorrow has no entrance. The chapter is not finished. Perhaps you are standing closer to a new beginning than you realize. And perhaps this moment is not asking you to prove that you are ready for everything. Perhaps it is simply asking you to trust God enough to take the next step. That may be the moment you've been waiting for.